All right, so today we're going to dive into a world that maybe seems a little, well, you know, kind of stiff at first glance,
Yeah.
like compliance,
Right.
risk management, governance,
Right.
all those things. But what if I told you
Okay.
these topics are actually like your secret weapon
Uh,
to understand the future of like finance and technology?
I like that.
Yeah, think of it this way.
Okay.
They're not just rules, but it's like a roadmap to where like the whole game is headed.
You know what's so interesting to me is that these seemingly dry areas
Right.
are really on the front lines of some of the most dynamic
Yeah.
shifts happening globally.
Totally. And to really get a handle on this, we're doing a deep dive into a
Hmm.
podcast episode called Thresholds and Monitoring, Preparing for Regulatory Changes in 2025
Okay.
from the Compliance Officer's Playbook.
Got it.
So you can think of this as like your insider guide to not just what the rules are,
Mm.
but why they matter and how they connect to some really like fascinating trends.
It's less about checking boxes, right, and more about understanding the forces that are shaping the future, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. So
Yeah.
let's start by like painting a picture of what the risk landscape even looks like today.
Okay.
I feel like things are changing faster than ever, right?
Definitely. I think we're way past just like traditional financial crime. Now you have to think about things like digital assets, ransomware attacks,
Right.
and even human trafficking. All these things are becoming part of this
Yeah.
incredibly complex and interconnected web.
Okay, wow. That's a lot to take in.
It is a lot. Yeah.
So for someone who's not like a compliance expert,
Right.
why should they care about all this? Like,
Right.
what's the real world impact?
Imagine you're trying to launch a new business
Yeah.
or even just make informed decisions about your personal
Yeah.
finances, right?
Hmm.
You wouldn't jump into a new market without understanding the laws and regulations.
Right.
So that's where understanding compliance comes in. It's about protecting yourself, your business, and even society as a whole.
It's interesting because when you put it that way,
Yeah.
compliance becomes less about avoiding trouble
Mhm.
and more about like having this deeper awareness of the bigger picture.
Exactly. It helps you make smarter decisions
Right.
and navigate an increasingly complex world.
Yeah.
And I think to really grasp this,
Okay.
we need to understand what regulators will be zeroing in on
Yeah.
as we head toward 2025.
Okay.
The podcast episode breaks it down into 4 key areas,
Okay.
starting with risk tolerance.
Okay.
Now, this might sound, pretty basic, but I have a feeling there's more to it than meets the eye. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, risk tolerance isn't just like a static concept, right? It's
Exactly.
not something you set and forget.
Right.
It's constantly evolving, and I think
Mm.
regulators are going to be looking for companies to
Yes.
actively reassess and adapt
Absolutely.
their risk tolerance as, the landscape changes.
Think of it as a company's immune system
Yeah.
constantly adapting to fight off new threats.
So it's like this,
Right.
dynamic process, almost like a muscle you have to keep exercising.
Uh-huh.
What are some of the challenges
Sure.
that companies might face in staying agile with their risk tolerance?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
I think one of the biggest challenges is simply keeping up with the pace of change.
Right.
New technologies and new risks are emerging all the time,
Yeah.
and companies need to be able to assess those risks and adjust their tolerance accordingly.
It almost sounds like you need a crystal ball
Right.
to see what's coming next. But
Yeah.
in all seriousness,
Uh-huh.
how can companies actually put this into practice?
I think it boils down to building a culture
Yeah.
of awareness and adaptability.
Okay.
This means having a clear understanding of your company's overall risk appetite,
Right.
constantly monitoring the environment for new threats,
Mm.
and being prepared to make adjustments to your policies and procedures as needed.
So it's not just like a top-down approach.
It's not just top down.
Yeah. It sounds like everyone in the company has a role to play.
Everyone has a role.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And understanding and managing risk.
Absolutely. It's about fostering a culture where everyone is empowered to identify and report potential risks.
Okay. So we've established that risk tolerance is this,
Right.
dynamic, ever-evolving concept.
Yes.
But what about the actual threats themselves?
Yeah.
What are regulators going to be most concerned about
Right.
as we move towards 2025?
This is where it gets really interesting.
Right.
The podcast specifically highlights the rise of digital assets, the increasing sophistication of ransomware attacks,
Right.
and even the risk of companies unknowingly being involved in human rights violations like forced labor.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a lot.
So we're talking about a pretty diverse set of threats here.
Very diverse.
What strikes me is that on the surface, these things seem totally unrelated,
Right.
but are they actually more connected than they appear?
You're absolutely right. These issues might seem disparate, but they're all intertwined in complex ways.
Okay.
Take ransomware, for
Yeah.
example.
Okay.
The payments are often demanded in cryptocurrency,
Right.
which can be harder to trace.
Yeah.
So you can see how these new technologies are blurring the lines
Yeah.
between traditional financial crime and cybercrime.
That's a fascinating connection.
Yeah, it is.
It's almost like everything is becoming like interwoven.
Yeah, definitely.
So we've got these rapidly evolving risks.
Right.
We need to be flexible with our risk tolerance.
Mm-hmm.
But how do we even begin to keep track of all this?
Right.
Is that where transaction monitoring comes in?
Precisely. Transaction monitoring is like the detective work of compliance,
Okay.
but on a massive scale.
Okay.
Regulators are looking for companies to use technology like AI and machine learning to monitor transactions in real time, flagging anything that looks suspicious.
So it's like having a, superpowered detective constantly scanning for red flags.
That's a great way to think about it.
But how does that work in practice?
Yeah.
Like, what's the technology actually doing behind the scenes?
So AI and machine learning algorithms are trained on vast amounts of data
Okay.
to recognize patterns and anomalies that might indicate fraudulent or suspicious activity.
Got it.
Think about it like this. Imagine trying to sift through millions of financial transactions manually
Right.
to find a needle in a haystack.
Yeah.
These technologies can do that in a fraction of the time with much greater accuracy.
So it's like having a digital bloodhound
Yeah, I like SIF.
sniffing out those bad transactions.
Exactly.
It sounds incredibly powerful.
Very powerful.
But does that mean that human compliance officers are going to become obsolete?
That's a question a lot of people are asking.
Yeah.
And it's understandable to think that with all this advanced technology that, human oversight might not be necessary.
Right.
But that's not quite the case.
Okay, so then what's the balance?
Yeah.
How do humans and machines work together in this new world of compliance?
While automation is incredibly powerful, it still needs human guidance and oversight.
Okay.
What's fascinating is that automation actually empowers humans
Okay.
to focus on the truly complex stuff, the judgment calls,
Right.
that machines can't handle, at least not yet.
Yeah, like a partnership then.
I see.
The machines handle like the routine tasks, freeing up humans to focus on those things that require critical thinking and analysis.
Exactly, and that's where the real value of human expertise lies.
Okay.
Humans can interpret the nuances of a situation, understand context, and make judgments that machines simply aren't capable of yet.
So it's not a replacement, but rather an evolution.
I think that's a great way to put it.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground already. We've talked about the evolving nature of risk,
Yes.
the need for adaptable risk tolerance frameworks, the role of advanced technology in transaction monitoring, and this crucial partnership between humans and machines.
Absolutely.
But with all of this in mind, what does it really mean for companies trying to stay ahead of the curve?
Right.
What's the key takeaway here?
I think the most important takeaway is that compliance is not simply about following the rules. It's about understanding the forces that are shaping the future of finance, technology, and even global affairs. It's about being proactive, adaptable, and constantly learning and evolving.
So it's not just like playing defense, right? It's about using this knowledge to like anticipate what's coming next and position yourself strategically.
Precisely. And that brings us to the last part of the podcast episode that we're deep diving into today, which focuses on best practices for exceeding regulatory expectations.
Okay, let's get to the good stuff.
Yeah.
What are the key takeaways here?
Well, the podcast highlights 4 main points.
Okay.
The first is to regularly revisit your risk tolerance framework. Make sure it's clearly documented, frequently assessed, and has the full support of leadership at the highest levels.
So not just a dusty document on a shelf somewhere.
Exactly.
Yeah, it needs to be like a living, breathing part of the company's DNA.
Exactly. And the second point flows directly from that. Staying ahead of emerging threats. This means actively monitoring for new types of financial crime, especially those driven by technology.
So like subscribing to all the threat intelligence newsletters, getting your team, trained up on the latest dark web trends, basically becoming a black belt in risk awareness.
That's a great way to put it. And then the third point is all about tech. Make sure your transaction monitoring systems are leveraging automation and AI to the fullest.
Because if you're still relying on manual checks in this day and age,
Forget about it.
yeah, you're going to be playing catch up forever.
Exactly. And even with the most cutting-edge tech,
Right.
you can't forget about the human element.
Yeah.
You need skilled people
Okay.
to understand and act on the alerts
Right.
these systems generate.
So invest in training, make sure your team is up to speed on the latest tools and techniques.
Right.
Okay, what's the fourth and final point?
This one is all about continuous improvement.
Quick.
Don't let your compliance processes get stagnant.
Mm-hmm.
Regularly assess and improve your monitoring and response capabilities.
It's like that saying, what worked yesterday might not work tomorrow.
Exactly.
Especially in this fast-paced world.
Couldn't agree more.
So if we bring it all back to our listener,
Yeah.
what's the one thing they should take away from this deep dive?
Compliance isn't just about avoiding trouble. It's about understanding the forces shaping the future of finance, tech, and even global affairs.
Mm-hmm.
It's about knowing the rules of a game that's constantly changing.
So not just rule followers,
Right.
but strategic thinkers who can anticipate the next move.
Exactly. And that's a valuable skill set in any field, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. It's like compliance is a superpower.
I like that.
Well, on that note, I think we've covered a lot of ground today.
We have.
We've gone from compliance snooze fest to compliance window into the future.
That's good.
But before we wrap up completely,
Okay.
I want to leave our listener with a final, thought-provoking question, something to ponder as they go about their day.
All right.
If you are a regulator,
Yeah.
looking ahead even beyond 2025,
Mm-hmm.
what would be the next XT big area of focus?
That's a great question.
What's bubbling under the surface
Yeah.
that we haven't even talked about yet?
And it's one I think everyone, not just regulators, should be asking themselves. Because the future is always changing.
Yeah.
And the best way to prepare is to stay curious, stay informed,
Right.
and never stop asking questions.
So true. It's all about embracing that continuous learning mindset.
Absolutely. The more we learn and adapt,
Mm-hmm.
the better equipped we'll be to navigate the complexities of the future.
I love that perspective.
Yeah.
It's not about having all the answers.
No.
It's about being open to new possibilities
Like,
and constantly evolving our understanding of the world.
exactly. It's about recognizing that the only constant is change
Yeah.
and embracing that change as an opportunity for growth and innovation.
So well said. And on that note of embracing change and looking ahead,
Yeah.
I think it's time for us to wrap this deep dive. But before we go,
Okay.
I want to leave our listener with one final thought. As we've kind of explored in this deep dive,
Yeah.
compliance isn't just about like rules and regulations. It's about understanding like this interconnectedness
Mm.
of global trends and how they're shaping the
Yeah.
future of, finance and technology.
And more importantly, I think it's about developing that
Yeah.
anticipatory mindset. Asking ourselves not just what are the rules today,
Yeah.
but what will the landscape look like tomorrow and how can we prepare for it?
That's such a crucial point.
I think so.
It's about being proactive, not reactive.
Right.
And I think that mindset can be applied to so many aspects of our lives,
Absolutely.
both, professionally and personally.
Whether you're an entrepreneur navigating a new market,
Right.
a financial professional assessing risk,
Mm-hmm.
or even just someone trying to make sense of the rapidly changing world around us,
Yeah.
this ability to anticipate and adapt is invaluable.
So, dear listener, as you go about your day,
Yeah.
we encourage you to keep those questions in mind.
Right.
What's the next big thing on the horizon?
Mm.
What trends are bubbling under the surface? And how can you position yourself to not just survive,
Right.
but thrive in this constantly evolving world?
And remember, the best way to stay ahead of the curve is to never stop learning, questioning, and exploring.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Thanks.
So until next time, stay curious, stay informed,
Yes.
and keep diving deep.